Hello and welcome back to the Believe You Can Paint channel. Today I wanted to share my experiences and impressions of using Liquitex acrylic ink during the Zenithal highlighting process, and also take a look at how versatile Citadel Contrast paints continue to be. We're picking up with the paint job that we put on the Bayakhee. You can see this on my channel, the full paint video with audio background. You can see I'm using my Sotar 2020 from Badger Air to spray white Zenithal highlighting. This is something you've seen me do on the channel before, and it's covered greatly across various YouTube channels, so I'm not going to explore the technique too much. What's different is I'm using the Liquitex acrylic ink, specifically titanium white. So this is your standard art ink, and I'm using it in a 2-to-1 ratio with Vallejo airbrush flow improver. And to me, this is a game changer in the zenithal step. If you take a look, we're getting really smooth coverage, and that's what inks were said to do, and I found that to be true. One of the components of that smooth coverage and smooth transition is how the ink goes on and how it sprays, so you don't get the spotting or the rough edges as much. It goes on much smoother. It also goes on thinner and more translucent. Um, that translucent coat allows you to build up your layers. And so where traditional zenithal highlighting a lot of times has multiple shades, so maybe a gray and then a off-white and then a high white, to build that color up. With the ink, you don't have to do that. You can just mix up one batch and slowly gradient it in. It's really obvious on the wings here, also on the head of Bayakhee, where I've done quite a few coats at the top and not as many at the bottom, and you can see it kind of transitions down to gray. His backside also has really deep shadows in the crevices like we went with Zenithal, but you can also see I'm putting in really high highlights right now. And what's another neat thing that I found, and something that made it a fast process, was as you spray it, it dries a little darker. So you could spray it and say, oh, that's perfect. And then it'll dry a bit darker, which leaves you a guide for your next layer. Overall, I think that this is going to be a game changer for me. It really sped up the process and just got amazing effect. I mean, the wing, you can see there, I'm just pulling in just a hair where I stop spraying each coat, and it's giving it that fading off gradient effect towards the darks. You do want to be careful where you put it because with enough layers it can become very strong. You can see up on his neck piece and where the sun would be shining if it's a overhead light. It's becoming very strong and almost getting to the point of too much. Another benefit of the ink, though, is that it goes on so thin. You're not losing the detail. And so where that would be too much paint if you were doing like a Vallejo white or a pale sand or something like that, um, in this case, it's so thin that we haven't lost any detail in the face or in the shoulders or even the wings. So I think it's a really great way to do the highlighting. Um, the only issue that I had with it is I didn't let it dry enough, and this was my first time. So it does wet the layer below. And so you can see on his right claw, there's a spot that pops up where once I got the ink on and then followed up with the contrast too quickly, the airbrush blew out the paint. Or I touched it. I'm not really sure what happened, but you'll see the spot pop up in the video uh, right there where we're on frame right now. And it I had to go back and fix that spot. And so I would say probably give it more time. I didn't really give this any time to dry. I just kept going layer after layer, which is what I tend to do. Now I want to shift the conversation over to contrast paints. They're still relevant, and with Army Painter Speed Paints coming out, which I will have the full line of soon, um, they are back in the spotlight again. People are still finding more and more uses for them. I particularly I'm really enjoying them out of the airbrush. And you can see here why they're so good, or another way to use them. So right now I'm spraying I8 in yellow, and you can see it's a very high yellow, and it's working so well with the ink. It would be tough to paint this yellow if you didn't have those super bright whites. Um, and you'll also notice the color of yellow is very different than what we think cyan yellow looks like, or what it looks like as contrast paint. You get the more orange tones, which we're starting to see pop up here. And this is why these paints are so versatile. So I've backed the needle out just a hair, which is something you could do easily on the Sotar 2020. And I'm spraying just a hair more paint here. And you can see me checking it often because I don't want to overdo it. But as I spray that heavier paint, I'm getting more pigment onto the model, and we're getting that orange color. And so that orange color is what the crevices would be if you use this paint as a contrast paint. So it would pull in the low spots into that orange color, and then the high spots would be somewhere between the yellows that we have and that orange, usually darker. Um, so you could see I'm just adding and adding layers to that orange, trying to be sparing so that we can create a gradient. While we finish up doing the yellow layers here, I wanted to talk about air pressure just a little bit. My setup, I tend to run higher than what a lot of channels and what you'll see online. So my contrast, I'm running around 40 pounds. For the acrylic ink, I ran it at about 20 pounds since it seemed to flow a little better, and it was a 2-to-1 ratio. So it's something that you have to play with based on your setup. Now we're going to wrap up the video by showing Volupus Pink in action. I'm spraying it onto the wings after correcting a mistake, and I'm just putting more contrast onto the edges of the wings than I am on the center, and so it gives us a good gradient. It's easy with the airbrush. You can also do this with a brush, and I think the effect is pretty awesome. To get this range of colors, these gradients out of 2 colors out of the bottle, it doesn't get much easier than that, and I would suggest trying it. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.